All right, let's go ahead and get started, everyone. Thank you for being early and on time. I'm excited to have you all here today to chat a little bit about how to fund your education either through financial aid or through resources and benefits provided by the VA. I'm joined by Tyrone Hewitt, who Tyrone is my self-proclaimed expert when it comes to navigating benefits, especially educational benefits for applicants that we work closely with here at Service to School. If you are on LinkedIn, 100% give him a follow because he shares some of the most timely and pertinent information, especially as it drops as new policies are coming out, changes throughout the VA. So Tyrone is truly an expert. And thank you, Tyrone, for being here with us today to chat a little bit more about how our students can maximize their GI Bill either through VR&E or other funding outcomes. So with that, everyone, we are recording this webinar. We'll send a recording out to all of you and also post it on our resource library. So you'll have access to that. Tyrone will also be sharing the resources that he mentions with us throughout the webinar. So you'll have hard copies of those coming to your inbox as well. But to kick things off, I am going to start talking briefly a little bit about financial aid. So this is through the FAFSA. So any academic institution program that you are enrolling or applying to, you'll probably see on their website somewhere they mention federal financial aid. So this is the FAFSA. It is free. I just wanted to run through 5 points for the FAFSA, right? So we want you to think about this as a free application to just have access to funding. And that's going to be funding in the terms of grants, loans, or institutional scholarships. These aid programs are awarded by the federal government, but they are processed through the institution that you are applying to. Some aid programs are first come, first serve. So that's why you'll see up there, submit your FAFSA early. And typically this application opens the fall before you enroll in your program, and you'll submit a FAFSA every single year. Again, this is a free application. Before you submit the FAFSA, gather any necessary documents. That's going to be social security number, tax returns, and W-2s. You use a prior year. So for 2025, you'd be using tax returns from the 2023 year. You can find a way to link your IRS tax returns with the FAFSA, but always nice to have those documents on hand when you are working through those documents. And when you go to file the FAFSA, you will create a FSA ID. You will create this before you log in to submit your FAFSA, and there is a little bit of a delay in getting that FSA ID number. So give yourself plenty of time. As a veteran, you should be considered as an independent student, regardless of what the FAFSA is telling you. Because you are a veteran, you should automatically be considered independent, which means you do not have to submit parent or custodian information. If for whatever reason it is populating on there and it's automatically defaulted to a dependent status, our best practice is to input all zeros for parent social security number information. That will apply to if it is auto defaulting to the dependent status. Again, FAFSA is free. If you go to FAFSA.com, it's a scam. They're charging people to file the FAFSA. So I do like to make sure you're using the appropriate website, FAFSA.gov. And then keep in mind, FAFSA results aren't final. You'll receive a student aid index, which was previously known as the EFC. That is now the SAI, which shows your expected family contribution. So how they determine your financial need is the cost of attendance minus your SAI minus any other aid, which equals your financial need. And schools will use that information to determine your financial aid package, but you can always appeal the financial aid package. Sticker price is rarely the price that students are paying because they are using the FAFSA or outside funds. So definitely don't let that sticker price deter you, but absolutely work with the financial aid office should you feel you are worthy of appealing that decision. For the CSS profile, so this is another application you might use for funding. But the CSS profile is typically used by private colleges that award institutional aid. Some might require the FAFSA and the CSS profiles, but you can check a participating list on the website. Again, gather all of those documents. The CSS profile goes much more in the weeds. So they are looking at records of untaxed income. They're looking at assets such as real estate or any investment accounts. So much more in the weeds, looking at your personal finances. Beware of deadlines. Again, it's crucial to get these applications in on time so you can receive the most amount of award. In the CSS profile, there is a fee. However, fee waivers are available. And these are awarded to eligible students based on income level, and they're automatically applied during the application process. But if you are not eligible, don't be surprised if you do see a fee there at the checkout for the CSS profile. And then again, you should be considered an independent student when completing the CSS profile. If not, go ahead and input those zeros. And then just some other funding opportunities. Outside scholarships, Pat Tillman, Jack Kent Cook, VA sponsored scholarships. I know there's one there for nursing specifically. So if you're looking for outside funding, those are really great places to start. Service to school, we also will sometimes receive scholarships from other nonprofits or foundations that are looking to support veterans. So we will advertise those as well. And then institutional scholarships, these can be awarded by academic departments or academic majors. Those will typically be on the school's websites. And then also looking for schools that meet 100% of demonstrated financial need. And again, that financial need is determined by the FAFSA and the CSS profile. But there's a really solid list of schools that are meeting 100% of demonstrated financial need, especially for our student veterans. So you can definitely find that on the internet. And then just published this morning is a service to school scholarship database. If you go on our website, servicetoschool.org/scholarships, there you'll find an entire roll up of scholarships. We have it sorted by branch of service, by some scholarships specific for military dependents, and then just a whole slew of scholarships that are open to anyone. So definitely go and check out that database and see if there's any that you might be eligible for. So I like to plug those other funding opportunities, but I know a bulk of our students are using GI Bill or VR&E right now. So I'm going to turn it over to Tyrone so he can dig a little bit more into those funding streams and how you can use those to fund your education. So Tyrone, again, thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. When you emailed me earlier this month, I was like, yeah, I definitely, love what you guys are doing for our active duty service members, veterans, etc. So what I'll do is I'll actually follow your slide and I'll touch up on VR&E first. So VR&E, for those of you who do not know, it actually changed several years ago. It used to be called Voc Rehab. They renamed it. The one thing I would like to point out, VR&E definitely has an opportunity to pay for education, but it's what it really is. It's an employment program, and it's designed for service members who are being medically separated or veterans who already have a disability rating to find a pathway for them to become more employable, right? And I'll use an example. I had a client who reached out to me several years ago. They were separated for a back injury, but they were a machinist mate. They kept going into machinist mate, but kept quitting their job because of the overall pain, right? So the first thing I told them was I would enroll in VR&E, right? And talk to a counselor because you need something that's going to be less physically demanding on your back, on your body. And the Navy trained you to work with your hands, knees, elbows, back. You need something that's going to be a little bit more, it's going to be a lot less physically required on that back. And that's just not a physical requirement. That could be a mental, there's several type of disabilities. You may have a mental disability that prevents you from going to work. What I will say is one of the biggest obstacles I see with individuals who try to apply for VR&E is, in my opinion, I don't think they fully communicate how VR&E or an education can help benefit them on the employment side. And I'll use myself as an example. I was an electrician in the Navy. The Navy trained me to do that, and then I retired. If I were to continue doing that now, and I got to a point where my back and my ankle and my shoulders could no longer do that, and I applied for it, they may say, well, you have years of leadership, you have years of experience. We can look in these other areas, or maybe you can go into this particular field. What I would then do is say, well, I need something that's a little less physical. Maybe, IT, cyber is a big one I'm seeing people go into because at a desk on a computer, right? I would have that conversation, and or not to get too personal about myself, but I do have a rated mental disability, right? Right now, I am in a person job. I help people from 9 to 5 or whatever my working hours are. If at some point I felt like, and there are days, honestly, there are days I have bad days, right? Um, if I got to a point where I felt like I don't think I can help people any longer, what I would do is I would connect with VR&E, get a counselor, and say, "Hey, I understand I have well, I wouldn't initially tell them, I would apply. And then when I had the conversation with the counselor, they'd say, "Well, you have a bachelor's in sociology and a master's in human services counseling. We think you're employable." What I would at that point say, my job is I have two skill sets. One, aircraft I can't do no longer. Two, I have a degree in helping people, but I feel like I cannot do that any longer. I need to find a job maybe where I'm um, you know, less pressure with the job, less one-on-one things of that nature. Maybe I'm going to an IT. But long story short, what I stress to everybody is that you have to be able to speak to the council, let them know how, because they're just not going to throw money at you. Let them know how the financial benefit of sending you to school is going to help you become employable. What that counselor may do, because there's 5 tracks, or there's quick employment, reemployment, um, business or entrepreneur. There is, I'm drawing a blank. There's 5 tracks, right? They may look at another track and say, hey, maybe on the job training is more towards your pipeline. Um, to make you employable. So I think it's just important to people to understand their disability and then communicate their disability. I think I saw a question come up in the chat.
Yeah, Chelsea's asking if you can apply for VR&E while being in service and pending a BDD rating.
No. Well, you probably could, but I think they would. I think they would probably either hold on to it or quickly, because first thing they're going to determine whether or not you're qualified, right? They're either going to hold on to it or just reject you. The only group of individuals who can apply for VR&E and successfully go through are those who are going through the MEB, PB, or the IDES process, and those people are identified by their branches being, in most cases, medically separated or retired, right? So what the DoD and VA has agreed upon is they can apply, and the goal is to start getting that person quick track so they're getting their training a lot sooner than having to wait until they get out, right? But if you want to apply now and kind of have them freeze it, maybe. But I would not be shocked if they hold on to it or quickly, quite honestly, quickly reject you because you don't have a VA rating, is what they're looking for. Right.
And
Any
can
other questions about VR&E?
you talk a little bit about the minimum VA rating that typically you all are
Oh,
looking
yeah.
for?
Yeah, let's look at that because there's a couple different VA ratings, and I always get those confused because there's one, coincidentally, for those who are getting out. So I work a lot with individuals who are being medically separated. That's probably 50% of my clientele, based on the command I cover. Um, so let me give you the ratings because it does, and it changed before. Come on. That's a good question because that's important to know. And that's another reason why the BDD will not work, because a BDD, you're not going to get your rating until after you separate. Benefits delivery or discharge will not give you a rating until any earlier than the day of or the day after you get out. Anything before that, you won't have a rating, so they won't even know if you're eligible. Right. So if you have a 20% pre-discharge rating, so that's the medical service members I'm talking about, right? I work with service members who know several months before they separate that the DOD has found them unfit and the VA has already given them 20, 30, 40, 100% disability. They have that long before they get their DD 214, right? After you separate, the other rating is going to be, let me make sure it's not, yep, 10%, right? So you have to have a service connected disability of 10%. So remember it like this: 10% as a veteran, you're already out, or 20%, you're going through the medical board process and they know they're going to separate you. Yeah, I want to double check because I don't want to get those swapped.
Sure. Another question just came in. Do you have to use VR&E first, or can you dabble into your GI Bill and switch to VR&E?
Yeah, that's one of the things that also changed. So here's my advice, right? So I would utilize VR&E first and then um, go into your post 9/11. Because what there's rules like there's 48-month rule, there's some other rules out there, and you don't want to make yourself less likely to either one get less months or just become ineligible because of some advanced education you have. Oh, and another thing. Um, so the VR&E has a stipend that they provide. If you do not have post 9/11, any months post 9/11, they will give you their stipend. If you have 1 month of, if I'm not mistaken, if it's 1 month of post 9/11, they will then give you the housing rate for the zip code you're in. And that can be a huge difference because if you take time to look at the VR&E stipends, they can vary. All right, so I will move along and go over some stuff that may be of interest. So let's look at this one right here. So, and I'll email them to Sydney. There's plenty of guides. Can everybody see this? Can you see this, Sydney?
Yep, see it now.
Okay, cool. There are plenty of guides that I think will answer a lot of questions. I'll go through these quickly to some of the things that I get a lot of questions about and provide clarification on. Right? Because I do get a lot of different questions about VA education. Come on. All right. So one of the more common questions I get is how many different type of degrees can I get, or what kind of degree I can get, or can I get? You can get an associate's, bachelor's, master's, or doctorate, and they also pay for certificates, and I'll talk about that. I just got a question from somebody I was actually stationed with and deployed with many years ago. Her question was, I have a master's degree. Can I get a bachelor's now? Absolutely. Right. It's your money. You can use it. The only thing you're going to have to provide is some kind of degree plan, which your school is going to provide anyway. And I'll use myself as an example. So every once in a while, I think about, maybe going into teaching as a history teacher. It's something I thought about doing maybe after I retire from this job. So depending on what grade level I teach, I may actually need a bachelor's degree in history. So if I still have my GI Bill, what I could do is I can go back to school, maybe go to ODU or one of these other universities to obtain that. So there's no, hey, we think you've already maxed out your education level. You cannot work backwards. That's actually not uncommon. Another thing, if you look to the top left, the VA has a program called it used to be called the VA licensure certification licensure program. They've renamed it, and really what they did is now they will pay for the courses for you to get a certificate. Excuse me, to PNP is a big one, and there's all these other certificates. One thing a lot of people don't realize is you can actually do two. You can do two things at once. I'm not sure if I would advise it, depending on your workload. But if I were, let's say, going to school to get my bachelor's degree in logistics, but I also wanted to get a certificate from the VA in logistics management. I could actually do both at the same time. Um, the VA will pay for the school, they'll pay for my BAH, but then what will happen is the way the licensure certificate program works, I pay for the material to study, I take the test, pass the test, I fill out my form, I send it to the VA, and they reimburse me. The only thing to be cautious about using the certificate program or the reimbursement program at any time is that when you have 36 months or 48 months, and we can talk about that later, when you have months that you're utilizing for post 9/11, the certificate program will pay up to $2,100 per month. And for every $2,100 you use, it equates to 1 month of GI Bill. Now, there are very few certificates, I'm gonna be honest, or licenses that I've seen cost that much. Most or I've seen some that are 40, $50. You may want to pay that out of pocket. I've seen some IT certs that go into 7, 8, $900. But just remember, you can use both at the same time. Using $2,100 total in a month will take a month worth, right? So if I have 9 months left and I need a certificate and I use it, and I use one to I use $2,100, it's going to take me down to 8. It's true, just really a matter of managing your financial resources so you get to the goals you want without depleting all your resources. Couple other things that kind of come up, trade schools, community college. There is a really good program called VA's On the Job Training Apprenticeship Program. I know Sydney talks about it quite a bit, with internships and things like that. For those of you who are obtaining degrees, but you're still trying to get that hands-on experience, um, that you may need, that you may not get in your school. If you have the GI Bill left, and you can actually use this alongside your GI Bill. If you want to use your, and it's going to take from your 36 months also. But if the VA has a program where, and I'll use two examples. If you're using VA OJT in combination of school, you're only going to get housing once, and that's from your GI Bill, right? But it will take from your months. If you graduate, and let's say you have 6, 7, 8, 9 months left, and you found a pretty good OJT program that's approved by the VA, and I can send anybody that link because there's two tools. You can use the Weems link or the OJT link. If you find an on-the-job um, training program or apprenticeship program that's approved by the VA, what will happen is that job will pay you, right? They're supposed to pay you a minimum salary, and the VA will pay you a housing for that zip code. So I'll use myself as an example. Let's say I went to ODU and I got a degree in mechanical engineering, and I wanted to do an on the job training program with oceaneering, and they're in the program. I could contact on Oceaneering. I would contact one of the recruiters I know. She'd put me in contact with the guy who runs the program and say, hey, I want to do this on the job training program. They would bring me in, they'd pay me a minimum salary, and then I would get the same stipend that a student in college would get. And I think or housing, I think our housing is about 2,200 bucks a month for the first 6 months, right? 6 months paid, GI Bill, I get my quality training. Anything after 6 months and every 6 months total, it goes down. So first 6 months is 100%. If I wanted to do a year's worth of training, which I don't think I would have to, those other 6 months, the second half, they would only pay me 80% of the GI Bill. So instead of the 2,200 bucks a month, I think it's probably about what, 1,900 bucks. So that's just something to kind of keep on your radar in the future. Right. Another really, really, really good program that I don't think it gets enough attention is a program called Edith North Rogers STEM Scholarship. Right. So this can provide 9 months, up to $30,000 of additional benefits, through the veterans or and through a couple different programs, for individuals who are going through a STEM, which is going to be your science, technology, engineering, math program. Right. The important thing to remember about that is you have to apply for that benefit when you've already exhausted the your GI Bill, or when you are about to exhaust it, right? So I was looking at it earlier, and one of the things I kind of want to annotate, and I think I actually may make a LinkedIn post about this today. So when people think STEM, and I noticed this many years ago, most of us think, I would say, hardcore STEM, right? But when you look at all the courses that are eligible, you're talking about agriculture, biological, computer engineering, obviously, mathematics, obviously, national resources, physical science, and then there's a tiny little area called other related fields. If any of you individuals are going into a field where it's STEM related and you think you may need more money, I would absolutely look at that. And this can do a couple different things for you. One, they have an option to kind of do a dual program, right? Or you may want additional courses. In the website, there is a note that says you cannot use this program currently to obtain a graduate degree. However, I have known people who, I talked about dual programs earlier. I have known individuals who did a dual program where they were working on a bachelor's degree and in fact a master's degree, and they were able to utilize this program for that. That may be something you're interested in, but I just kind of want to highlight that because an additional 9 months and or $30,000 is a significant amount of financial assistance when you're in this field. I mean, there's some other criteria like teachers and stuff like that, but This is something that is not talked about enough. Um, any questions about Edith Norris, VAOJT, or anything else I spoke about these last 5, 10 minutes? All right, I will get going.
Tyrone, can you hear me? Anyone in the chat, is it frozen for you all as well? Tyrone?
Couple individuals who
Ooh,
they did.
Tyrone,
Go ahead. Did you have something to say?
you froze for that entire last segment. I'm so sorry.
Okay, no, 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 you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. Okay, I'll work backwards. So,
Okay.
kind of remember GI Bill and Post 9/11 are two different things. The Montgomery GI Bill just gives you money every month, or they send you your, they deposit your money. You have to manage that. You have to pay your tuition, your books, and everything else. The Post 9/11 pays the school directly, sends you your housing, and gives you your book stipend. Um, in most cases, post 9/11 is most valuable, more valuable. I've seen the Montgomery GI Bill in a couple cases, but very, 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 very few cases. I can count on one hand where that existed. Um, the big thing to remember about your post 9/11 is to remember that they pay percentages in two different factions. One, um, if you have 100% of service, you will get 100% of your tuition and housing. There are a couple people who don't complete an entire enlistment for a number of reasons. For example, 80% they may complete 80% of an enlistment. The housing is only 80% deposited to you, and they will only pay 80% of the tuition. But I don't see that too often. Another thing to remember is whether or not you're online student, a part-time, or I'm sorry, online student, in-seat student, or a combination of both. If you were fully online, post 9/11 housing allowance is only, I think it's $1,100 now. They just raised it, right? So that's something to remember. If you are full in-seat student, you will get the housing allowance for that zip code. If you are a combination of both, but you sit in the seat during that duration, you can, I know some people, they take 3 online and 1 in seat, you will get the full in seat rate. So, and I'll use myself as an example. If I were going to ODU and I was a full-time student and I took 3 classes online, sat at my house and completed them, but I drove to ODU or any of their campuses in the area, they would give me the full in-seat rate. So that's just something to manage. I bring that up because a lot of people kind of, they kind of count on that housing allowance for housing and things of that nature. You just kind of want to be aware of that. All right, let's see if there's anything else in this particular guide. Spoke about that. Okay, cool. I think the only thing I was going to talk about here, just, the programs you're utilizing, really, really important. Obviously, if you're part of services at school, you're already kind of in the know, but all those additional resources um, that the schools often provide, I would say those resources, Vital, SVA, Veteran Success on Campus. Um, One of my biggest concerns with veterans who separate is that they not always adjust well from going active duty to being a student, and they sort of isolate, right? I just actually had somebody talk to me about that yesterday. So I walked them through some stuff that ODU has. My goal is to help people find those resources so they can, just live life, right? Um, Nothing wrong with finding your tribe, and sometimes your tribe is through some of your classmates through some of those groups. All right, so I am done sharing this one. Did anybody have any questions about that first guide? Yeah.
A question that came in through the Q&A. If you're currently employed but are temporary grant funded and will be out of work in 6 to 9 months, would it be ideal to apply for VR&E now or wait until you're unemployed?
Ooh. Yeah, that's a good question. So, Cindy and I kind of spoke about that. What I will say is when you look at the law with VR&E, there are some very objective laws and rules there. Um, but I will also say it seems like sometimes there's a subjective view to it. Um, this is what I would be concerned about, and maybe I'm wrong. You have a job, you have a successful job, and then the counselor's like, "Well, why do you need the program if you're employed or you're employable?" If you're unemployed, it may be a little bit easier to say, I'm unemployed for this reason. But that does go back to my first discussion where you may be unemployed or not just I'm sorry, not just unemployed, but maybe even underemployed, which means you're not, living to your full potential based on your skill set. So unemployed or underemployed, right? If you fit one of those categories, they may say, okay, it makes sense for the program. Um, it makes sense for the program to be you know, given to you or approved, right? Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so let's share. We're gonna share this one, this guide, and I can email this to everybody because there's a lot of good information in there. Another thing a lot of people are not aware of is there's two things. You can actually have the VA pay for a tutor, right? You'd have to apply for it. They'd have to determine if you're eligible. But if you're struggling in a class, fill the class. The VA has a program where they will pay for a tutor, right? You may or may not need a tutor, but if you can save that money and have the VA pay for it and you don't pay for it, more power to you. Another thing some individuals aren't aware of, there's a personalized career planning and guidance vocational technical training program, chapter 36, excuse me, where the VA can help you kind of align that education training that you've received going into your vocation or your career. I would say that is probably one of the things that many people struggle with, whether or not you're active duty and getting out, you're active duty, went to school, and now you're looking for a job. Really trying to figure out, you know, what jobs are available, how to apply, how do I align, my degree or my certs to an employment field that I both desire and that will take me, etc. Those counselors can definitely help. So I would utilize them. I don't know if anybody on here is planning on transferring your benefits. Um, there are some very strict rules on that based on years of service, years of reenlisting, and etc. Um, so I would just kind of pay attention to that. There are some eligibility factors if you go reserves.
Timely, Tyrone. A question came in about reserves. Are reservists who have a service-connected disability from a deployment eligible for VR&E? Served less than a full
Yeah.
enlistment.
Yeah, no, that's good. So, yeah, that's a good question. And I think the key word there, honestly, is that deployment, right? And it's not that the disability came from the deployment itself, but it means that they were activated, right? So the VRN is going to see if you have any kind of active time because you, in fact, can go reserve. And the only thing you do is, I hate to say this, but you train and then you kind of go back to your house. But in fact, there was a very large period of time where many of our active or reservists deployed or were activated. So yeah, if you are a reservist, activated and deployed, you have a disability rating, absolutely. Yep. You just have to have a VA rating. That 10%. Yeah, good question. Talked about this. The STEM. Ooh, let's talk yellow ribbon. So yellow ribbon, yellow ribbon is a program that can potentially fill the gap for any money you may owe to your college or university after the GI Bill is paid for, right? So Right now, the GI Bill is worth, if I remember correctly, a little over $28,000. Right. If I go to a school, and that's a good amount of money. If I go to a school that and the tuition is $40,000, there's a potential that I don't owe that $12,000 difference. And this is how you're going to find this out. One, you can search. There's a on it. You see this little hyperlink. There's a yellow ribbon search tool. You can use that or the comparison tool. It'll tell you. First, I have to find out if a school is on the list, right? If they're on it, good to go. Another thing I have to find out is how much will they cover, right? And the way it works is, let's say I was going to go to Duke and I had a guy a couple years ago who was going to go to Duke. School's 40 grand a year. Duke pays $6,000. The VA pays $6,000, which equals that $12,000 difference, right? The one thing I have to look at is to make sure that to see what they cover, because even if a school is in yellow ribbon, they might not necessarily cover the whole amount. They may say, "Hey, there's a $12,000 difference, but we're only going to pay $6,000 of that," which means you owe the $6,000, which is still beneficial. Another thing you have to look at is how many openings there are. We have schools in my area where it is unlimited. One of our law schools is it is unlimited. They will pay the full amount, and they don't care if 5 students apply or 50, right? So you may look at it and it may say we'll cover $12,000, but only for 5 students. At that point, you have to get with the school and determine how they determine that. I do know some schools, they if you're a first year, maybe a second year student, you won't get approved. They usually will approve students who are on the way to graduation, right? So, is the school approved? How much money is the program? How much money is within that program? And then three, how many opening slots there are. Some schools have slots. Some of your larger universities, I think looked at University of Southern California, they were broken down to programs. So you may look at a school, it may have like this particular school had a certain number for business students, a certain number for like law students, et cetera. So as you are maybe thinking about going to different schools, and it doesn't matter if it's a 2 year to a 4 year school or master's degree, doctor, whatever, as you're, I would say, shopping around, that may be the difference between two schools, right? One school that has yellow ribbon and another school that doesn't. Um, but that takes a lot of research on your end on trying to navigate which makes the most sense. Because I have seen students who will pick a school and the GI Bill will only cover $28,000 of that. The next question I ask them, where's the rest of this money going to come from? And there are some methods, but yellow ribbon may be part of that. It's not always guaranteed. Any questions about yellow ribbon? All righty. Here's one program I will talk about. I'm not sure if too many people are going to be eligible for it, but for those of you who are in VR&E, not VR&E, Dependents Education Assistance Program, just updated again. Not last August. I feel like I'm getting really old because these years are going fast. Not last summer, but the summer of 23, right? Based on timelines and age. If you are a spouse of a veteran who has 100% permanent total disability rating, or maybe unfortunately, you're the spouse of a survivor, or you are the child of um, or you are the let me work backwards. If you are a spouse of a veteran who's 100% permanent total, or a child of a veteran who is 100% permanent total, or a survivor, you may be eligible for. There's a program called Dependents Education Assistance Program. It is not um, tuition; it's a stipend that most people honestly use for education. Right? You just have to be eligible. There's a lot of different criteria. It's actually been loosened quite a bit the last 18 months. If you fit into that category, I can walk you through that. I would read up on it. You cannot use this with any GI Bill. You cannot use this with any other VA education. But if you deplete your GI Bill or post 9/11 and you're eligible for this, you could potentially get money every month that could be used for tuition, right? Or quite honestly, you could use it for whatever you want. You just have to be enrolled in school, right? Um, I know some people who have scholarships from their state. The state pays it for state. The state pays for the tuition, but they're eligible for DEA because that's a state funded program, and it's a stipend, right? So, and that can be in combination. Hazelwood Act, I know people using it here in Virginia, back in Texas, but that's just kind of on your radar for those you married to a spouse 100% permanent total or the child, right? Just something to think about. A little bit extra spending cash. Any question about any of that? All right. And then I'll do last slide, and then I think I may go into like, and this is gonna be, I think, less funding education. Let's go through this real quick. Uh, yeah, this is yeah a lot more career networking stuff. I would just say keep in tune with your career offices if you have them. Most of you seem to be on LinkedIn. Utilize this resource. Build your network, job search strategy. But Sadie and I would both agree is one of the more frustrating things is to spend 3, 4 years, maybe even 6 years in college, and then it's very difficult to use a job. There could be a number of obstacles of why that exists, but this career planner, I think, can kind of help with that process, right? Um, I would say I would start sooner than later. Um, there are a lot of really good paid internships out there in the civilian world and with the federal government, if they're still open. But I would start very early on kind of doing that research to align your education completion with your um, employment goals, if that makes sense. So that's that. Those three things. You can ask questions about that. Some people may have questions about the new law that changed with the Rudisill and the 12 months, but discussion's wide open for anybody who has comments, questions, or concerns.
Yeah, any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or those of you using Q&A, that works great as well.
Yeah,
But yeah, you have Tyrone here. Ask any questions that you might have. We
yeah,
have probably another 5 minutes scheduled for the webinar, but any questions, feel free to drop them.
yeah. And there's no such thing as a stupid question because everybody's situation is completely different. I had a guy in a class many years ago who he was an active duty service member, so he had his own GI Bill, and he had both parents were veterans, so he had both their GI Bills. Now there are some rules with how many months a person can use, but one of the initial questions was, um, can he utilize all the months? And it's like, okay, let's look on what they're entitled to. Because believe it or not, the VA does actually have a cap. Um, but to have all of those 336 months or close to it is, I mean, you could be like a JD slash MD slash whatever.
All the letters behind your name. Tyrone, two questions that we get quite a bit when we're talking with students onboarding at the undergraduate level. There have been rumors of service members, veterans who started using the GI Bill and then down the road learned of VR&E and then were able to get their GI Bill back
Yeah.
retroactively. Have you personally heard about that?
Yeah. So when I started looking at that, so one or two things. Many of those people actually got a letter or an email saying, "Hey, you know what? We've identified you for retroactive payback. If that's not the case, this is what I tell everybody about the VA. I don't care if it's education, VR&E, disability. You let the VA tell you no. Let them tell you no, because there are some little quirkiness things with that they can see and they know, and they may say, yeah, Tyrone has no clue what he's talking about. We're going to tell you yes. So even when you're told no by somebody else, ask, shoot your
Absolutely.
shot.
Absolutely. Chelsea asks, would you recommend for someone to go to school full time and use all the benefits, or should someone seek employment right away to prevent a gap within the resume?
Ooh. Um, so I would say this. I think gaps in resumes are probably a lot more common than people realize, right? And there are a number of reasons, right? My wife and I got married. We were single. We started to have a family. She had a gap in her resume for 2 or 3 years. Um, but she did volunteer work. She had to keep some stuff going on and went right back into the workforce. For veterans to get out, or active duty service members to get out and go to school and go to work later, not uncommon. Whether or not you live on your own or you're a spouse. Um, so I would not jump into work just for jumping to work's sake. But what I would do is I would in your future be able to, say on your resume how what you did in college. But also there are a lot of things you can do out in town because experience is experience and you don't have to get paid for it. So let's say you're going to work to be a social worker and you would have to do an internship, I believe anyway. I would find something out in town where maybe you're volunteering, 10, 15, 20 hours a month. That's going to directly align with that work. It doesn't always work like that. I've seen people, build web pages for small mom and pop businesses, but I would not lose sleep over the gap. But I would wisely use that time. I often tell my students, if you're waking up at noon, eating a hot pocket and playing Fortnite, we may want to visit your priorities, right? But it's just about utilizing your time. Um, you know, Going to school full time and working is not an easy feat, um, especially depending on what kind of degree you're getting, what program you're in, because you want to be a successful student. Ain't there's no use in having a degree because the federal government doesn't. Sometimes they look at your grades, right? They're like, man, you may want to retake some of these classes, and they will tell you that actually. But you want to be a successful student. There is a program, I didn't bring it up. The VA has a program called Work Study. That may be useful. And there are work studies all over. Um, some schools have them. Some VA departments has them. I can walk you through it. You can Google VA work study. What that does is that you do a minimum hours a week, but you're still a full-time student. That may be beneficial, especially if you find something that is going to bring in a little bit extra cash and maybe aligns to something that you want to do post-service or post-graduation.
Someone asked if you could touch on the recent Supreme Court decision on those that reenlisted over both
Yeah.
eras of Montgomery and post 9/11.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, first of all, a person has to have at least yeah, a person has to have more than one service contract, right? Reenlistment, essentially. And it doesn't matter if you reenlisted once or 4 or 5 times. What you can't do is you can't, and some of us did it. I think I did it. My first enlistment, I extended for, I'll give you an example. I extended my first 4 years, I extended for a year, but then reenlisted. If I extended for that year and then got out, I would not be eligible. I reenlisted, so I have two contracts, right? So if you reenlisted, and I'll email Sydney some stuff because there's a really good tree. They'll look to see if you have multiple enlistments, and then they're kind of going back and forth, but not really on whether or not you just have to have been eligible for that Montgomery GI Bill. Most of us paid that $100. For those of you who are already swapped over, you used to have to give one up and take the other. They're getting rid of that, but 48 months. Um, if for a person who has multiple contracts, whether or not you reenlisted, you got out, you came back in. Um, Let me think about that. I'm trying to think of some of the more common questions. Ooh, this is a big one. So, what a lot of people don't realize is it's a combination of 48 months, not all 48 months. And what I mean by that is, I'm actually looking right now. Um, I gave my 36 months to my family. My wife used them. I'm eligible for 12 months. One, I cannot give that to them because they can only legally get 36 months. But because I already expended that 36 months post 9/11, when they give me my 12 months, I'm only actually eligible for the Montgomery GI Bill. So when they give me my months, I can't convert that over to post 9/11. It'll be the Montgomery side because it's a common because what they're doing is they're saying we're going to give you the option to use both programs. I can't say how to use both programs, but then only use one. And I just went through that this morning. I was going through some information with somebody. Um, Let me think. What are some other tricky things? Some of you may have gotten an email. I would encourage everybody to explore it. There's a form. I think it's the 22 Tech 1995. I think it is. I'm starting to read like this, so it's like I'm holding stuff like 5 feet from my face. Yeah, 22, 1995. It is a good deal for those of you who may need extra college, right? And maybe you weren't a proof. Yellow ribbon didn't work. Edith didn't work. These 12. Look, I wasn't planning on. I'm gonna be honest with you. I wasn't planning on using it, but then as I sat down, I was going over some stuff this morning for this. I asked myself, why not? Why would I not burn that 12 months? So I went to one of the local schools. I'm trying to figure out what extra graduate courses I may take or certificate or something. But you best believe, um, whether it's later on this spring or sometime in the near future, I'm going to be an active student, right? But I'm going to try to. Um, my goal is to align it to my professional goals. Um, but you know, if I just want to, I love history. Maybe I'll just take some history classes, but use it. Use it, don't lose it. And I'll send the decision tree and some other information about that. The decision tree pretty much kind of spells it out. It's those people who have kind of quirky questions about, hey, I used this, but I gave this and I did this. It gets a little kind of like, huh, but pretty plain and simple. More than two contracts or more than one contract, you should be good to go.
Got it. Any other last questions before we say goodbye to Tyrone? Sounds good. And like I said, beginning, if you are on LinkedIn, absolutely follow Tyrone because he shares a lot of really great information, almost daily. Learning new things from Tyrone on LinkedIn. So I definitely encourage you all to check him out there. Other than that, like I said, we will be sending out the recording and any of the resources that Tyrone shared via email. So be on the lookout for that. And you can always reach out to Tyrone too.
Yeah.
He's incredibly helpful. Every time I've sent him students with just those one-off questions, they always say how helpful he's been. So Tyrone, thank you for supporting service to school and the work that we do here, but also just being an incredible advocate for your veteran peers. So everyone, thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to seeing you all at future service to school events. Take care, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Tyrone.
Yeah, I'll shoot you that email.
Perfect. And then, yeah, if anyone reaches out to me, I'll pass along your contact information as usual.
Okay.
But once you send that stuff over, then I'll get Amanda will edit the recording, make it
Okay.
look all
Yeah.
pretty, and then we'll get it out to everyone. So
Cool.
thank you. Think of anything you need from me, anything I can do to help.
Nope. Shortly after this, I'll shoot you that email, and then just reach back out if you have any other comments, questions, or concerns.
Sounds lovely. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day.